Hey everyone, it's Joelle here. It has been 2 months since I last filmed a video, but I have been very busy. Unlike most of the people in the US, I am considered essential, so I've actually still been going into work. But when I am not at work, I have been listening to audiobooks like crazy. I actually listened to 14 audiobooks in the months of March and April. It's pretty crazy, I know. They were all thrillers, with the exception of one was kind of like a, I guess, sci-fi. I don't know. But yeah, I'm just gonna go through them as best as I possibly can. Some of them start to blend together. I just quickly made some notes and I'm gonna try my best to remember them. Before we get started, if you aren't already following me on my social media accounts, you can definitely do that. They're down in the description box. Very active on Instagram stories. Most of it is very makeup oriented. Twitter wise, I'm very soccer oriented. So I'm kind of like a very well-rounded human. But yeah, I would love to connect with you guys on other social medias. So let's go ahead and get this hair out of my lip gloss and get started. So the first book that I read and completed was Behind Closed Doors by B.A. Paris. And I remember in my last recent reads video, I had just started it. So it was like the last day of February and I finished it in March. I gave this a 5-star. Basically, this is a story about a woman named Grace. She has a sister who has Down syndrome and they live in the UK, and most of these books are set in the United Kingdom. I don't really like American books, but anyway, Grace marries a guy, and Tom, I think his name is Tom, and everything seems really perfect and everything, and they have plans to have the sister move in once she gets too old to stay in her current like home school place that she lives in. But there's a little bit of creepiness. Tom may not appear how he seems. I liked this book because I feel like a lot of books don't necessarily include characters with Down syndrome, except, you know, maybe I'm just not finding them. But I think they did a pretty decent job of portraying her, although, you know, it was an audiobook, so I feel like the narrator did a good job. This was my first B.A. Paris book, I believe, so I enjoyed it. I don't know if B.A. Paris is a male or a female, but really good job of portraying the characters, and I liked it. The next one was The Nanny by Gilly Macmillan. This one I also gave a 5 stars to. This is a story of Jo. Jo has a little girl, and growing up, Jo lived very wealthy with her parents, and her mom never really wanted to have a daughter, so they hired a nanny, and the nanny ended up being more of like a mother to Jo versus her actual mother. But her nanny ended up leaving when she was a kid, and yeah, they never heard from her again. Well, Jo comes into some financial hardships and has to move home with her mother, who she doesn't really have a good relationship with. And it turns out that the nanny, yeah, may have come back into the life. Also, a body was found in the lake near their home. So is it the nanny? Is it not? We don't know. So yeah, it was a good one. I liked the mom character the best in this one. Gilly Macmillan, I really enjoy her style of writing. And again, I think the narrator did a really good job. The next was Bring Me Back by B.A. Paris. This one I gave a 4-star to. Okay. So a lot of the books that I gave higher rankings to, well, pause. A lot of the books that I gave lower rankings to involve couples and just a couple. The ones that have kids and family and other things, I feel like I gave higher, or like single women. I don't know. I think it's just something that I have. I don't know. It could have just been that that's how I was feeling this month. But this one is basically a couple named Layla and Finn, and, you know, everything's perfect. They love each other, blah, yada, yada. And then one night they're driving and Layla gets out at a rest stop and disappears. So they presume she was missing and or dead. And Finn ends up moving on with Layla's sister. So they're together. They're planning on getting married and everything. But Layla suddenly starts coming back into the picture with mysterious notes. And he thinks he sees her and everything because she's got red hair. She really stands out. So it's kind of like them. Like, is he really seeing her? Who's sending these notes? We don't know. It was just okay. I predicted the ending really quickly. That's the problem when you read / listen to so many thrillers. You end up getting to know them very quickly and varying them out. So that happened a lot with a lot of these ones that I read. The next one was The Couple Next Door by Sheree LaPena. And I'll tell you right now, I gave this a 4-star, but thinking about it now when I was doing my notes and everything, I didn't really like this one as much. Anne and Marco live in a very nice neighborhood, and it seems like they almost live in like townhomes. It was really hard to kind of figure it out, but I'm pretty sure they live in townhomes because their wall borders their neighbors. But anyway, their neighbors invite them over and they have a newborn baby, and the neighbor is kind of like not a fan of babies. So they're like, oh, we'll just leave the baby asleep next door and just keep checking on her every half hour or whatever. So they're doing that, and then they go back in and she's gone. And she's kidnapped. So they're freaking out. They're trying to figure out what happened to the baby. The police are like, you're negligent parents. One of you did this. One of you arranged this. And the wife, like, she is really rich and her parents are rich. So they're offering like millions in rewards and stuff. This one was just okay. Babies. I don't like babies in stories. You guys know this if you watched my videos in the past, because again, breastfeeding. Don't tell me about breastfeeding. I don't care. I'm actually listening to an audiobook right now and breastfeeding came up and I'm like, stop it with the breastfeeding. Yeah. If there was like anything to complain about, forget murder and all of that violence, but breastfeeding, so yeah, I give that one a 4. I don't think I'm going to pick up another Sheree LaPena. It was just kind of like, meh. It was available from Libby, so I got it. Next was The Perfect Girl by Gilly Mcmillan. This was another one I gave a 4. It was just okay, and it was one that I predicted so early on. Zoe plays piano, and she's at a performance, and suddenly we find out that her mom is killed. Zoe has a disturbing past of being kind of a violent teenager and lashing out, and ended up in a mental hospital at one point. So automatically they assume her, but did she really do it? We don't know. They kind of have like one of those Brady Bunch families where her and her mom live with a guy and his kid, and then there's a new baby. There's a cool aunt, and then there's a it's not actually a detective, it's a solicitor, which is actually a lawyer. And they're all just trying to figure out what happened and who done it and all of that kind of stuff. It was okay. I don't relate to piano playing at all, but yeah, it was all right. Not my favorite Gilly Macmillan, we'll just say that. Next was Before She Was Found by Heather Gundikoff. This was my first Heather Gundikoff one, and I actually really, really liked it. Basically, you start off the story where a 12-year-old, I think she's like 12 or 13 or something, named Cora is found at railroad tracks, all bloody and beaten up and stuff, and we don't know what happened, but her 2 friends were there, Jordan and Violet. Violet is in utter shock. She's not talking. She's freaked out. Jordan is kind of like the bitchy teenager mean girl. But then you flash back and find out Violet and her mom and brother kind of moved to small town after trying to like escape some like bad past or whatever. And the girls become friends because they have to work on this project about urban legends. And so a lot of it is focused on an urban legend that they're trying to learn about for a school project, but it's like about a guy who in the past in that small town like killed a bunch of women. And so they go online and somebody claims to be that guy, even though he would have been like 90 or something. So it progresses and everything. And you learn more about the relationship between the girls, their personalities and all of that. The mom trying to like protect her daughter because she thinks her daughter might have been involved. The teenage son who may or may not have been involved. So it was a good story though. I liked it a lot. Next, I finally got in Come Tumbling Down, which is number 5 of the Wayward Children series from Sean and McGuire. I was so excited. This one I listened to in a day because these are really short. They're like novellas. And I was also really excited because it was a story of Jack and Jill. Jack and Jill are my favorite characters from the book. Can't really talk about this much because if I do, it's going to spoil the whole series. But essentially, if you don't know about the Wayward Children series, this is a series of books about kids that somehow end up in these portals to different worlds, and then they end up coming back to normal Earth, and they all live in this school because all their parents and stuff don't believe them, so they send them to the school where all the kids live. Well, this is a Jack and Jill story. Essentially, I can't really say much because the way that the one before that ended will ruin everything, but 5 stars, loved it. Next was another 5-star. This was my first Alex North. This was The Whisper Man. This was a really interesting story. So it was long, and I don't typically like stories that are male focused and written by men. I don't know why, but yeah, so Tom and his son Jack moved to a kind of like the neighborhood creepy house after he becomes a widower. And yeah, so he's an author and he moves to this house and everything, and there's all these rumors about local legend, the Whisper Man, being like a child predator and killing kids and stuff. So his son Jack is a little bit kind of different. He's little. He's like 6 or something. He's like a little kid, or maybe a little bit older than that. But he has an imaginary friend that he talks to a lot, and the kids at school pick on him. But they soon realize that his son may have talked to somebody through the door, some creepy man, and we don't know if this is the Whisper Man, if it's all real, if it's not. Meanwhile, we have a detective named Jonah who is trying to help out with this situation. And yeah, I can't go into too much more, but it's a lot of father-son type of dynamic relationships, which I actually really enjoyed. Again, it's really hard for me to relate to father-son relationships because I'm not a man and I don't have a son, but I have a dad, so... but I really liked it. I definitely want to check out more from Alex North. I know he has another book that I'm very, very interested in getting an audio of, so hopefully that'll come out soon. Okay, next was called She Lies in Wait by Geetha Lodge. Hopefully I'm saying that right. I gave this a 5-star. I loved this story. Sort of predictable, but sort of not, because there's so many different characters and a lot of perspectives. But essentially back in the 80s, all these teenagers go to a camp and they bring the little sister of one of the popular slutty girls. And yeah, she ends up missing. And it's like 20-something years later, and the body is found in that area by some rando person. But also a whole bunch of drugs are found. So this detective's name was Jonah. Oops, the other story had a different dude's name, but this detective's name is Jonah. And he actually knows all these kids because he grew up with them. They don't really remember him because they were cool and he wasn't. So we're trying to figure out what happened to this girl named Aurora. So it flashes back to that time from Aurora's perspective, and then it's like normal day to Jonah's perspective, trying to solve this crime. What happened to Aurora and who did it? It was a good one though. Really liked that one. Next is The Girls in the Garden. I loved this story. I loved it so much that immediately when I finished it, I texted my mom and said, Mom, if you have not read this story, you need to read it right this second. She read it already though, but she didn't remember it much. but she did remember one part of it. But anyway, this is a very interesting setup. Again, UK, yay. So there's this apartment and condo kind of complex where in the middle of it is like a big garden, kind of like open landscape area. And there's like 3 different main families involved with this. There's a woman who moved to that apartment after her husband burned down their house and went into a mental institution hospital for recovery. So she took her 2 daughters and lives there. Then there's another family where it's husband and wife and their 3 daughters, and they're kind of like hippie homeschoolers, and like very organic and all of that stuff. And then there's another girl who lives in a condo with her mother, who's like never around, but all the kids are friends and they start hanging out, and you're just starting to kind of like learn how these characters are developing. It was really confusing from an audiobook standpoint because I couldn't remember who was who till like halfway through the book. But it talks about like the girls becoming friends, the mom dealing with her husband being in the mental hospital. The husband of the other woman is kind of really flirty, and they had to recently take in their his dad because he has diabetes and had to get a foot removed. There's also like this old lady who has lived there forever. She's a Holocaust survivor and has a rabbit, and she like kind of like sees everything. So something bad happens, and it does kind of flash back a little bit, but the bad thing doesn't happen until like 3/4 of the way through the book, and then we're trying to figure out who done it, what really happened. So that was actually a really good book. And then the end, the last sentence, you're like, holy crap. Really good though. I love me some Lisa Jewell. Like, Lisa Jewell is one of my all-time favorite authors. Next one I really, really liked, but I gave it a 4-star because it was predictable. This was Not a Sound by Heather Gundikoff. So this is a story of Amelia. She used to be a nurse in the ER and worked with a lot of battered women. And one night, unfortunately, she gets hit by a car and becomes deaf. So she becomes an alcoholic, and her husband kicks her out, and she ends up living in a cabin in the lake with her assistance animal named Stitch, who is some kind of like hound, and she speaks a different language to him with his commands. She also has a friend that is a police officer. One day when she is paddle boating on the lake, wakeboarding, some kind of boarding, she discovers the body of actually one of her friends who is also a nurse, and she starts to get this conspiracy theory that somebody's trying to kill all the nurses to help with the battered women. But you know, there's her police friends involved, and they're trying to solve this, but she starts thinking that somebody's after her. And it's really interesting from the perspective of like a deaf person. We say deaf. I've learned that the PC term is actually deaf. So yeah, I liked it, but very fast, very predictable. Like really fast storyline. Like next chapter, you're like, oh, whoa, where did the time go? But I liked it. Next was a really good book called Before She Knew Him by Peter Swanson. Gave this one a 5-star. This one, yeah, I really liked this one. This is a story of an artist. Her name's Henrietta, but she goes by Hen. And she and her husband moved to a house, and they moved next door to this really nice couple. There's a guy who's a teacher, and his wife, I think she sells like K-12 software or whatever. And this is all in Massachusetts. So Peter Swanson writes mostly in New England. And they go to dinner with the couple next door, and Hen sees a trophy, like an actual like trophy. And she's like, wait a minute, isn't that the trophy from like evidence from this murder that happened? So she starts to become obsessed and figures out and thinks that her next door neighbor is a murderer. So she kind of starts stalking him a little bit. We know that she has a history of bipolar disorder, and she had some issues in college. But it's very interesting because you get her perspective, where she's like, I'm not crazy, this guy's a murderer, all that. And then you get the guy next door's perspective and like his past and everything and what he thinks of her. And you kind of love their relationship. It's weird, but really, really good. And totally twisted surprise ending that I didn't think of. But I liked it. And then the next one is called 8 Perfect Murders, and this is also by Peter Swanson, and I give this one a 4-star because I didn't really like the ending. This is actually, it was a cool concept though. So this guy named Malcolm, he works in a used bookstore that primarily focuses on mystery thriller type of books and horrors. And years ago, he had written a blog on their website called 8 Perfect Murders in like literature. Well, an FBI agent approaches him one night and is like, hey, I think somebody's actually reenacting your list of the 8 perfect murders. Can you help me solve this? So they're just kind of going through the list and trying to figure out if this is actually happening or if this FBI agent is just trying to come up with some kind of theory to help her job or whatever. We also find out that Malcolm's wife died very, very early on in the book. You find out that she had died in a car accident. So it's interesting because you find out a lot about his past. I love the aspect of owning a used bookstore in small town street in Massachusetts. I thought it was cool. But yeah, I can't really go into too much because I feel like it would ruin the whole book. But I liked it. I thought it was a good concept, really clever. A lot of the books that he mentioned in his list I have never heard of before, which kind of makes me want to explore more authors. But yeah, I liked it. Wow, we're at 21 minutes. Let's get rolling here. All right, The Third Wife. This is the last book. The Third Wife by Lisa Jewell. I loved this book. This was an instant 5-star for me. This is a story of Adrian. Adrian has had 3 wives, and his most recent wife dies unexpectedly. One day she walks into the street and gets hit by a bus. But did she get hit on purpose? Did she kill herself? We don't know. Meanwhile, Adrian has 5 kids. 2 of them are adults. And from his first wife, who was like his teenage college love. And then he has a second wife, Caroline, who has 3 littler kids. And you find out a lot about Adrian and how he and Maya were trying to have another kid, and like how all of his kids feel about all of these different wives, how different everybody is. But the weird thing is that meanwhile, while all of this is going on, he had posted like an ad in the post office. I guess this is like a common thing in England. I don't know. About the cat that was Maya's, and wanting to get rid of it. And this creepy girl named, what was her name, Julia, goes over to his house and meets the cat, leaves her phone, starts stalking the family in the middle of everything. So they're trying to figure out who this chick is, on top of learning about the relationships between him and all of his children and how all of them are different. Loved it. That's all I gotta say about that one, because I think you guys should read it. So that's it. Woo! 23 minutes. It's probably time for me to go to work now. Talking really quiet because Anna is still asleep. But yeah, let me know if you've read or listened to any of these books. I would be curious your thoughts. I would love some recommendations in the description box of really good thrillers, because you know I like thrillers. That's pretty much all I read. Goodreads has my list of books that are all mentioned in here. But again, like I said, be sure to follow me on social media. I post a lot of makeup stuff and life stuff. And if you just like listening to me talk, you can listen to me talk some more on my Instagram stories. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you made it to the end, yay. You're awesome. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.